got an exceptional show today, ladies and gentlemen. This is one that I'm really excited to bring to you because we are going to be talking to Mr. Chris McKinnell. And Chris began his life in the paranormal at the age of 16, investigating a horrifying poltergeist case with his grandfather, Ed Warren. Yep, those Warrens, ladies and gentlemen. Over the past 43 years, he's investigated over 10,000 cases all around the world. He was involved with some of the Warrens' most famous cases, including Satan's Harvest, the Maurice the Rope case from The Nun, and the haunting in Connecticut, for which he was the lead investigator. Chris is currently living in South America and studying the different ways that the paranormal manifests in these various cultures. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Portal Podcast. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thank you all for joining us, and special thank you goes out to all of you who continue to support the podcast and continue to spread the word. Always remember, if any of you out there have experiences of your own that you'd like to share, feel free to email me at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com. Again, paranormalportalradio@gmail.com, and you too could be a guest on the show. I was looking forward to this. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chris McKinnell. Hey, Chris, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Brent. I appreciate that.
Oh, it's absolutely
looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. This is a rare opportunity. Of course, I guess first and foremost, you got to deal with the elephant in the room. What was it like growing up with Ed and Lorraine?
I love my grandmother with all my heart. The woman's a saint. My grandfather was a practical joker who loved scaring people. Mm-hmm. And I have to admit, I spent, up until the night of my very first case, I was terrified of the dark. I could not sleep without a light on until the night I went on my very first case.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So were you exposed to this stuff through your whole childhood, being that you were kind of growing up in their presence, or was it more something that you grew into in time, or how did this work?
No, it was always there. Always. I mean, I was maybe three or four, and I got locked in the museum at night. Yeah. I wasn't there by myself long.
Sure.
Only a few seconds of screaming my bloody head off until my grandfather came running out of his office and rescued me. It left a lasting impression. And you got to remember, I was born in '64. They started becoming well known, especially in Connecticut. They had their first book out in '68. It was called Deliver Us from Evil. Mm-hmm. Then by '72, I think, the Lindley Avenue case in Bridgeport, Connecticut hit. And that was the first time they really got public recognition. After, over 20 years of investigation, nobody knew who they were. Mm. And then that hit. And I was 7 years old. And I'm growing up watching the news attack these crazy people who were calling themselves ghost hunters, and the people at school are making fun of me as the kid with the crazy grandparents.
Oh, yeah.
So I was exposed to a lot of the ordinary prejudices that people have when you're dealing with the unknown.
Sure.
And I didn't like the publicity, I have to admit.
Yeah, that'd be hard, especially at a young age. It's like, wow, yeah, and certainly people can be plenty cruel, but so you grew up in concert with this activity and with these items and such. At what point did you make the choice, like, this is what I want to do?
Well, the truth is, I was also growing up as a budding psychic, and I had no idea what I was dealing with. And because my mother is terrified of the paranormal, and my father didn't believe in the paranormal, my grandmother, to keep the peace within the family, never, ever said anything to me about what I was experiencing. Instead, I would go to psychologists and psychiatrists and have to deal with it that way.
Sure.
We try to do something different now. My grandmother, she couldn't help me, but she made it up by helping anybody else that ever came to her who claimed to be a psychic and helping them, guiding them. And as soon as the first movie came out, we had so many people asking for help because, most psychics grow up in isolation.
Sure.
They feel like they're strange. They feel maybe they're crazy. And with my background in therapy and so forth, I suggested, Graham, why don't we start an online support group? It became so popular that we now have one in English, one in Spanish, and we've got about 1,000 members around the world.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
So that means a lot to me. And I apologize because I do ramble, and I have lost the complete thread of what your question was.
Well, it was just, when did you make that conscious choice that this is my direction, right, this is what I want to do? Was there a pivotal moment, or was it just always clear to you?
No, I didn't have an interest per se. By the time I was 10, I was investigating other religions because I wanted to understand things. I was, the Mormons were coming in, and then I was studying with Jehovah's Witnesses for 6 months, and I was studying Zen Buddhism, and whatever I would come across, I wanted to study. But when I was 14, I started going on lecture tours with my grandparents. And I even, one of the trips, I got to meet one of the exorcists from the case that the original movie, The Exorcist, was based on. There's an actual case that movie is based on that had 3 priests, none of whom died, by the way, at least not in that case.
Sure.
One of them came to the lecture, and that was pretty amazing. And then to see my grandmother during a PM magazine or one of these other afternoon talk shows, she was standing in front of a haunted house. I was with her at the time. And we were also with a local reporter. And she's rattling off everything that was happening inside that house. All of the ghostly happenings. No story had ever been printed about the house. But the local reporter, had all of his notes for a report he was writing. And I'm watching my grandmother kick off everything that this guy had learned about was going on. I'm thinking, my grandmother is a superhero.
Yeah.
So at that point, I'm intrigued. But by 16, I'm still afraid of the dark. I'm still totally overwhelmed by fear. My grandfather tried to join the Marines in World War II when he was 16. I think he got sick and tired of seeing me be so afraid, and he took me onto a poltergeist case as soon as I had turned 16.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a life-changing experience. It made me see the human cost.
Sure.
It made me see the people who were really hurting and suffering, and it made me want to help them.
Right. Yeah.
So I think, when I was 16, that moment probably sealed my fate.
Well, and it's a fantastic fate, I think, especially with the focus and the mission of the Warren Legacy Foundation that you are taking care of and championing currently. I can't think of a better foundation or a better practice than to reach out to people that need the help. It's, of course, I think we're all interested in the phenomena, but I think it's easy to forget that these are people that are dealing with this and trying to piece together a life after being confronted with these incredible events and horrifying events in a lot of cases. And, how do you get back to normal then? And so it's fantastic that you guys are reaching out and making that your mission to help these people and it's not about, ego. It's just about helping. And I'm so thrilled to hear that that's what you guys are doing, because I think there's a big hole in this pursuit. And you and I were talking before the recording, and it's like, so often people are needing help, and they call in investigators, and investigators come in and they get their evidence, or they get they do their research, and then they leave. And oftentimes following investigations, the activity goes off the charts. But the investigators are gone now. They've done their part and they've done their thing, and without much regard to what are these people dealing with afterwards and how much worse has it gotten. And so I love your very human approach, is what I'm trying to say, I guess.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that was the reason for the foundation. After the first movie came out, I had never liked these paranormal shows, so I never watched any of them. Mm. But after the first movie came out, and with all of the hoopla that was going on around it, I started paying a little bit of attention. And my grandfather had already died, and there was this one jackass on YouTube claiming he was using his spirit box to talk to my grandfather. He's a well-known fake, Steve something, who takes recordings of famous people and then garbles them or plays them backwards or whatever, so you hear their voices. But of course, it's all fake. Oh. And I was so disgusted by what I was seeing online that I just said, no, we have to take care of people. That's what this is about. Yeah. And I have been lucky enough to surround myself with well over 100 members around the world who offer their abilities and their expertise and their kindness to those who are suffering. Mm-hmm. I do want to say, though, we take a very holistic approach, and there's some basic things people can do to protect themselves right up front. If you are being bothered, if you are terrified of what's going on in your home, the first thing I want you to do, really, really look at the phenomena. Don't look at it through the lens of your fear. Okay, you're hearing footsteps in the hallway at night. You hear a rushing wind. You hear knocking noises. A cup flew across the room and smashed against the wall. What I want you to ask yourself first, has anybody been hurt? No. Okay. Is something maybe just trying to get your attention? Granted, yes. A cup flying across the room and smashing against the wall, that's violent, it's scary. But you have to remember that a spirit doesn't always have complete control over their energy. Mm. And they can be trying to get your attention, and something seems violent, but it really isn't. Or maybe somebody in the home has out of control psychic abilities, and they're the one projecting that cup across the room. You'd be amazed how many times that happens. Especially, by the way, and this is not to demonize these folks, it's actually the opposite. People on the autistic spectrum are often incredibly gifted. Oh. Incredibly gifted. And I really believe that they could be the next step in our evolution. But they can be incredibly psychic. I remember one case we had with this woman, the mother of a man on the spectrum, and when he was a teenager, they would have fights all the time, and poltergeist phenomena would erupt every time they fought. And then she contacted me and she said, everything died down after he moved, and he got married and he has kids, but every time he comes over, even before he gets to the house, the phenomena starts picking up again. I said, what's your relationship like with your husband, with your son? Oh, it's still very, very contentious. I was like, I'm going to suggest that you work on the relationship, because what was happening is he was also getting so tense, so uptight about having to see her, that phenomena would start up as he was getting to the house. Wow. So that's one thing. Please look at the phenomena. Look at the fact that it can be caused by many different things. And then the other thing I want you to keep in mind is that spirits have to follow the rules we set. I don't care what culture I've studied, what religion I've studied. If you believe in the rules you're setting down, if you're saying this is as far as I will allow you to go and no further, then you can actually set down the rules. You have to believe in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a lot of times, pretty much every religion I know of utilizes ritual to focus your clear intention and your faith to make those rules happen. For instance, there's a religion called Umbanda. It's an Afro-Brazilian religion. It's starting to spread all over the world. It's in New York. It's in Portugal. I actually studied with a temple in Portugal. But the amazing thing is, all of their priests, and there are several priests in every single temple, are trained mediums. And they channel spirits of each school of spirits that the temple will allow. So some temples have up to 7 schools, some have up to 5. And each week is dedicated to one school of spirit. And each priest has one spirit in particular that they channel from that school. And then you as a congregation will work with that spirit for your spiritual welfare. But what they do ahead of time is they start with drums, they set up a rope line, they have certain dances and rituals they do, and they have specific spoken rules for what the spirits are allowed to do and not allowed to do. Spirits are not allowed to give gifts. Spirits cannot accept gifts. Spirits cannot tell you to eat anything. Things like that. So when you put those rules down, they will follow those rules. That's the same thing in a Catholic ritual or any other ritual. That's what an exorcism ritual is. Actually, baptism is a minor form of exorcism. It washes away any evil that's attached to you.
Interesting. Can you define schools? I'm trying to understand, what does that mean?
Sure. Yeah. Well, this is in the religion of Umbanda.
Sure.
Also in Kimbanda, but that's a little darker. But basically, like, there's the Old Blacks is one school.
Okay.
This doesn't mean that these are all the spirits of old black slaves from Brazil and Africa, but they have certain attributes. There's the guardians, there's the old sailors, and they each have their own way of acting and interacting with you. The old blacks are very nurturing, very caring, give you very compassionate advice. The guardians are just that. They're there to protect you. The old sailors can get out of hand. They can get raucous. They want to drink. They want to smoke cigars. And the rules in the temple I was in, no smoking, no drinking. You're using someone else's body. But there are other temples where it's perfectly allowed. That's a form of voluntary possession.
Yeah.
And it is not violent and it's not confrontational. One of the reasons I travel around the world is to understand that, because I'm an exorcist who doesn't exactly want to have to go to war if I don't have to.
Sure.
If I can find a better way, I want to use it. Mm-hmm. But if I can also give you one more piece of advice, folks who are being troubled, look at the underlying reasons why things are manifesting negatively in your life. Human spirits are as real as anything else. They're as real as you and I. I don't make a distinction between living in people who are no longer in body, incarnate. I think we all deserve respect and help. And I love helping the dead. But look at why the haunting in your home is negative. What's going on in your home? Are you dealing with drug addiction? Are you dealing with domestic abuse? Are you dealing with some trauma in your past or mental health issues? This isn't to say that the paranormal is not there and it isn't manifesting. I want to make that really clear. What I'm saying is when the paranormal manifests in a negative way, almost always, there is a reason why you are being bothered and the person next to you is not. And we want to treat you holistically. We want to treat that problem as well. So even before you get a hold of a paranormal group, and please, if you're going to get a hold of a paranormal group, start with us. I know that sounds terrible, but I mean, just so many disreputable ones out there, and I don't want to see you get hurt.
Sure. Yeah.
But before you even do that, look at those things, and clean your home. Get rid of all the clutter. Make sure there's a free flow of energy. Don't argue in your home. Take it outside. Leave the negativity outside. Yeah. Don't conduct investigations in your own home as well. Don't pull out the spirit box and all this crapola, which, by the way, you're wasting your money. Just saying. Don't do that in your home. You're inviting spirits in when you do that. Yeah. You'll intensify the phenomena, and most people don't have a clue how to deal with that.
Chris McKinnell, the director of the Warren Legacy Foundation for Paranormal Research, which he founded with his grandmother, Lorraine Warren, to help people all around the world who are being troubled by the supernatural. All of their services are free and confidential. I'm really glad you said that. I firmly have believed, and I do a little bit of paranormal investigating as well, not regularly, and I don't claim to have much of a knowledge, of it. I'm just out there looking and seeing what I experience. But I do think you really hit the nail on the head there, because there does seem to be in many situations like this the need for the spirit to get some form of permission. The hauntings generally start out very subtle, and it's like, again, I'm not saying they're all negative, but just let's say it's a negative haunting. Starts out very subtle, like it might just be a dark, cold thing, and it might escalate over time. But it seems to be that these negative spirits are pushing people to surrender. And when they surrender through fear, and I think fear is very fundamental in this, that fear is a form of surrender. So if they can make you afraid, you feel powerless, and then the fear comes, because it's like something's happening, I don't know what it is. The fear happens, and I believe that it weakens our control of our environments, maybe our energetic providence to the place where we live, or, for lack of a better term, I'm just, spitballing terms here.
Well, our fear takes over the manifestation. Our fear directs it then.
Yeah.
Because I hesitate when I hear people use the expression evil spirits and things like that.
Sure.
And I think I've said this in every single one of many hundreds of interviews. I don't believe in demons. I don't believe in fallen angels.
Okay.
I've studied the history of demons. Culturally, historically, for instance, just quickly, ancient Greek, the daemon was the go-between between God and humanity. Mm-hmm. He was the one that carried messages. Demons in Hindu or Buddhist religion are not necessarily evil. Garuda, I believe, carries Shiva or Krishna on his back, and he's a demon carrying a god. Even Satan, the term the Satan, which was the original term, was a spiritual prosecutor. He was there to test your faith. And when you look at the story of Job, for instance, that's a perfect example, because here comes Lucifer, Prince of Heaven, walking into the throne room, walks right up to God and says, God, I hear you got this guy who's your most faithful. Let me test him. God says, do whatever you like, just don't kill him. So he kills all his animals, kills his whole family, And then God rewards him threefold or tenfold, what have you, for his faith. To me, even, in the 40 days in the wilderness with Jesus, where Jesus is wandering before his crucifixion, and Satan comes and tests his faith, offers him the kingdoms of the earth and everything else. To me, it was the same prosecutorial role he was testing. And when I see these manifestations, I see the same thing. I see something that is pushing us maybe closer to God.
Mm.
Some of us do fall. Yes, I've had 2 possessions that ended in death, including the Maurice Theriault case. That's Satan's Harvest.
Mm.
And another one about 3 or 4 years ago.
I'm sorry.
So this is not something that should be taken lightly. It's not something that should be ever thought of as a hobby. And if you're doing this to get clicks and likes or a 5-second video of something, anything, then you're not in it for the right reason, and you shouldn't be doing it at all.
Mm.
You're a parasite on somebody's pain and horror. And those are the people that come first.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Very powerful. And I appreciate your insight on that. That's a pretty unique take. And I don't pretend to know, but I do think that what you're saying is incredibly intriguing. That's an interesting way to look at it, and it's worth considering anyway. I mean, who knows the mind of God?
It's only a theory. Yeah, I want to make that clear.
Sure.
What I've seen is the manifestations I deal with are culturally specific.
Yes.
So when I see an elemental, like a pixie or chupacabra or whatever, it's only going to be in the regions that there are stories of those. Now, is that because people have told stories because those creatures really only exist in those regions? Or is it because there was some kind of ambiguous phenomena, somebody made up a story, other people saw more evidence to support that story, and little by little, we created the form of the thing that is responsible for that kind of phenomena.
Mm.
We created the face of it. You had a wonderful explanation for that from Harry Potter.
The Boggart? Yeah.
In our previous conversation.
Yeah. Yep. The Boggart. And that's something I've often wondered too. And you and I were talking about this, like, how is it that certain regions have very specific type of hauntings, but the apparitions are very consistent within a region, but then once you go out of that region, it's something else completely. And that's what I was like, do you think it's an intelligence that it just kind of understands our expectation and whether psychically or however telepathically, and it presents that to create the most impact? Or is it a tulpa? You and I were having a great conversation about this. And again,
and I think that's what it is. I think it's a thought form.
Okay.
What I earlier started to say, this is my problem is I think of too many things. I'm the original absent-minded professor. We create the manifestation, I think. I don't think there is a demon per se. I think that's us. And if anything, that should be the most empowering thing in the world. Imagine if we had the discipline and the knowledge to take what we do by accident and make accidental manifestations. Imagine what we can do when we create them on purpose. Now, there are groups of people who can do that. Tibetan Buddhist monks. You can, or the Hindu, oh my gosh.
The yogis?
Thank you, yogis.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, these are people who have dedicated their lives to unlocking different disciplines and displaying how to make them work using their own bodies. Tibetan monks can do something as simple as raise their skin temperature, their galvanic skin temperature, in cold weather to take a wet blanket and heat it with their body. I've seen that experiment. They can create a tulpa, a thought form. For instance, a well-disciplined monk can create a full tiger that looks real, sounds real. You can touch it. It feels real.
Wow.
It'll scare the young initiates in the temple who are making noise, and then it'll disappear because it has completed its mission. And they are capable of doing that.
Yeah, I think.
So if they can do that.
Yeah.
I was in a poltergeist home. Now, this has been a really bad case. But for 2 years, everything was fine. We had brought in Bishop McKenna. He had done a great job. The family had gotten counseling. There had been a lot of problems with kids. But I just always maintained a friendship with them. And they invited me back with my cousin. And my cousin had never been there. So they said, why don't you spend the night? And I said, sure. And they gave us the 10-year-old boy's bed. Now, he wasn't happy about that, of course. But we got out our sleeping bags, and John and I got into bed, and the poor kid's 10 feet away in his sleeping bag on the floor. John starts yelling at me that I'm kicking the bed. And I'm like, John, I haven't touched anything. I'm still in my sleeping bag. Turn off the light again. Like, Chris, stop kicking the bed. Stop messing around. Bed picks up, flies across the room, smashes down, and breaks into pieces.
Oh, wow.
I was laughing my ass off. It was the most ostentatious display of power I had seen up to that point in my life. And I was like, that's amazing. That is so cool. John set a land speed record for getting down those stairs. And the woman of the house, her name was actually Lorraine, just like my grandmother. Uh-huh. She was sitting at the table having a cigarette and a cup of coffee. And she turns around, looks at John and says, now, you believe me now?
Wow.
The point of that story, though, nothing had happened for 2 years. We pissed off that one poor 10-year-old by taking his bed and making him sleep on the floor. He tapped into the energy still present in the home. And one night only, we got a massive display of power. Nothing else ever happened again in that house. For years afterward, nothing. It was a one-time thing. And that's when I started to realize what we were capable of. You know, in college, I'm going to go off on a tangent now.
Sure.
Forgive me. In college, I studied two particular theories, well, three, that really influenced me. One was Gestalt theory, which is the idea of a therapy that is very holistic. Like if you were going to examine a person's dream, you are every part of that dream. So if you're walking down a footpath and you see horse manure on the ground, I would ask you, so what does it feel like to be that horse manure on the ground? And the idea being, I'm eliciting different aspects of you. I'm learning more about you and how you view the world. And it's very holistic. So that was one. The other one was a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's an extraordinarily powerful thing. It's very similar to placebo effect in my mind. Because, for instance, here's one experiment that they did with many, many classrooms. They told the teacher, they did a fake exam, aptitude test. And then they told the teachers, this half of the class is going to excel this year. And this half is just going to do ordinary, they're going to do great, but just normal. And at the end of the year, lo and behold, that teacher had exactly those outcomes for their students every single time. Yeah. A placebo can be more effective than medicine. It's that same idea. If you believe in it, you can make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point.
Well, to me, that's an example of our power. But on the flip side, the third theory that fascinated me was labeling theory. Because labeling theory is the idea that human beings need to label everything to feel comfortable. Oh. People always ask me, what kind of psychic are you? What kind of abilities do you have? It's like, Well, I don't label them because that's limiting.
Right.
I'm putting a limit on myself. I'm saying I'm this, but I'm not that. So I don't label myself. People ask, what am I? I wear a lot of hats. I do a lot of things.
Sure.
And I don't want to label myself because I don't want to limit myself. Mm-hmm. But I've also seen the power of the label, because when you label that thing becomes what you've labeled it.
Yeah.
And I think that's also true with our spirits, our spirit world. If you believe it's the devil in the hallway, even if it's your grandmother actually coming to check on you, it's still going to be a terrifying experience, even though by rights it should be the most beautiful thing in the world.
I think those are very profound insights. I used to be a teacher for a period of time, and I enjoyed doing it and all of that, but I was in this training program provided by a university in the area, and they did talk about exactly one of those things that you mentioned, which I thought was incredibly profound then, and I'm glad to hear that you had had learned the same thing, and that was that the instructor was talking about how they had done an experiment, and I'm kind of split two ways on this. It was interesting in that it proved a theory, but it's also, I hope it didn't do any lasting damage to the subjects. But they took a inner city school that had this really underperforming group of kids, and they tested horribly. But they told these kids, "You guys are actually coming up as geniuses." And then they went to another school, and I'm paraphrasing this a bit, but where they had a classroom of excellent, excelling kids, and they did the test, and they said, well, you guys are actually pretty average. It's great that you're in this class, but it doesn't look like your tests really reflect that. And then they followed up, and sure enough,
unethical.
I know, right? Because you're actually killing the light in half of these kids and giving a light to half of them. But anyway, so that's why I'm kind of torn on this, but exactly as you were suggesting, both groups performed according to what they were told. The really underperforming kids that just were having all kinds of trouble suddenly became these overachieving genius level kids, and the genius level kids actually started performing very normally. And, which isn't bad or good. It's just, academics, but still, I agree with you though. I think it was a horrible precedent, but interesting that, you're absolutely right. We believe a version of ourselves and we manifest it. Yeah.
The truth is, we all carry light inside of us, and if we nurture it, we can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
I know this is going to sound silly, but I just watched this wonderful movie that I guess is on Netflix. It's called Beautiful Game, and it's about the homeless World Cup for soccer, for football. And I guess it's been going on since the early 2000s. And it was amazing to watch this movie and how empowering it was for these men and women who these are real people and real stories, and I want people to understand I'm a pastor. Look, so when I see the hypocrisy in churches where people preach, and God be with you and all this stuff, and then they walk outside and they ignore the guy suffering on the sidewalk.
Right.
No. We're supposed to help each other. And my work has taught me how extraordinarily powerful we can be. So when I see how we tear one another down and how our leaders pull us apart and weaken us, just like half of the people in your last experiment you talked about, I think that most societies, not all, but most societies are created in a way that is meant to dampen our light. It's meant to keep us conforming and less productive and less creative and less thoughtful. America, sadly, we are not taught to think. I'm what? I'll be 60 this year. I never took a civics class. They were already being phased out in the 70s.
Sure.
Kids today don't have a clue how government works. People today don't. And it's because we don't accept our own power.
Yeah.
And that's what the paranormal has taught me. We need to accept responsibility for the things around us because we are capable of so much, including getting rid of spirits that are causing harm in our home. And there are bad spirits, but those bad spirits are usually either human or created by living human energy and then take on a life of their own. Those can be really deadly.
Yeah. Before we wrap this up, I did have one question that I was hoping to ask you throughout the course of this interview, and we've still got time, and we'll go as long as we need to go. But I'm always curious, how far removed is the actual situation to what we see on the big screen when it's adapted into a movie? How big is that disparity in your experience, having worked?
Huge.
Okay.
Huge.
Yeah.
They're huge. Yeah. The Conjuring movies are based on real cases.
Uh-huh.
The Exorcist based on a real case. The Haunting in Connecticut based on a real case. A bunch of details are ridiculous.
Yeah.
Honestly, once Hollywood gets a hold of your story, you have no control over it. Even the documentaries you see. I saw one on The Haunting in Connecticut done by Discovery Channel. Now, this is when I was hiding from the public, and I wouldn't allow them to use my name at all. But John did it. In fact, that was his first case. It was I was teaching him on that case. But he did it with Discovery Channel. It's called A Haunting in Connecticut. It spawned the TV series A Haunting on Discovery. And the last time I looked, granted, that was 2 or 3 years ago, it was on YouTube. So if you want to look for an actual good documentary on a paranormal haunting, A Haunting in Connecticut was a good one. But other than that, I took place in that one called The Devil on Trial for Netflix. I thought the first 45 minutes were fine, but it didn't end well. I thought it wasn't well balanced.
Okay.
So I think that Hollywood has done a lot of harm because people think that's what it is. The number of people who come to me and say, Legion is after me, or Asterisk, because those seem to be the biggest ones for people in popular culture. Or Lilith demons. Those are popular for some reason.
Sure.
I think it's all Hollywood.
Sure.
And I say, look, it's not a demon. If it was a demon, you'd know it was a demon. Mm-hmm. There's no hemming and hawing about this. But you've made some amazing points today, and I agree with you. And I always look at both sides, every side I can to everything. You had made one earlier about these manifestations. There is one thing I wanted to get back to that you had mentioned earlier because it's very important, and that's about permission. My grandparents were huge believers that people have to be invited in. They always looked at the Ouija board as the worst thing in the world. I disagree with that. Millions of people use the Ouija board without any harm. It's not the board itself that's a problem. It's not tarot cards. It's not anything. It's you. It's your desire to make contact with the spirit world. And if my grandmother would say, like attracts like. If you're putting out negative energy, you're going to attract something negative. So it's Russian roulette, and you don't want to do that. Yeah. So, but I digress again. I apologize.
No, please don't. Continue. I do think that's very profound. I would like to Well, if you don't mind if I interject with just another idea.
Oh, no, great.
Because I'd love your feedback on this. So here's my take on the Ouija board, that, a lot of people are afraid of it just because, of course, of the horror stories. And they think, oh, don't touch those things. They're absolutely evil. And I don't think that by virtue of having an alphabet on a piece of board or paper or whatever, that it's evil. I just think that the risk with Ouija boards comes from the fact that first of all, it's a hands-on thing. Like, it's not just a tool. You're actually creating a circuit of sorts and a pull to some presence out there. So you're making yourself a blind channel. And I don't think most people understand that in order to effectively contact spirits and stuff, it's not just like, is anybody out there, playing a game of telephone? That serious practitioners channel, and they work on focusing and they work on protection to keep negative away. And it's not just like, you just pick up the phone and whatever's there. But I think that's the Ouija board people that are using it are just saying, is there anything there that would like to talk to me? And like you said, most of the time, nothing extraordinary happens. But on the chance that it does, you're giving intimate permission for something to not only come into your space, but to use your energy. And I think that's exactly where it becomes inherently risky.
Exactly. Okay. And again, it's that underlying issue inside of you. If you're a teenager going through puberty and all of your hormones are rushing around and everything's brand new and the end of the world, you've got a lot of free energy and you can manifest something. So be very, very careful. This is not something to be taken lightly. We touched earlier on all of these gadgets that are out there, the spirit boxes and everything. The truth is, there's only one that I trust, and that's the Estes method, because that takes the human element and removes it a bit.
Sure.
Nothing's perfect, but the idea being one person's on headphones, listening to a spirit box, yelling out whatever they think they hear, and somebody else, maybe even in a different room, is asking questions. Yeah. And if you start getting intelligent answers, even though the person shouting out the answers has no idea what the questions are, that to me is pretty credible. So I like that one.
Sure.
Digital photography, can't stand this stuff. Too easily screwed up. When it's digitized, especially when you're zooming in, you can easily create faces and all sorts of weird phenomena. The light balls and the stuff. Don't waste your time with that.
Sure.
But on to permission again, real quick. The last thing I wanted to say here was, it's not just about inviting evil in. If you want to get rid of the problem, you also have to use your free will and invite good in. It doesn't matter if you call that good the universe, Yahweh, Krishna, God. It doesn't matter.
Sure.
God doesn't care as far as I can tell. Every religion has exorcism rites. They all work, which tells me God's listening, to every religion, and he cares more about your heart than he does about your belief. As long as you believe in God and that God is an empathetic, compassionate, loving God, and you practice that, I think you're as close to godly as you can possibly get. And do that, especially when you're in a haunted situation.
Right. That's amazing. And I think that's very profound. I know that we're probably getting to the end of the time that we have available, but I do want you to take some time, Chris, and let people know how to get involved in the Warren Legacy Foundation, how to stay in contact with you if you're inviting that opportunity for people, and how to stay in touch with what you've been up to.
No, absolutely. No, I'm available to anybody anytime. If you need help, please reach out. You can find me on Facebook, Chris McKinnell, and you can find me on Instagram at Warren Files. And you can also find us at our webpage, which is warrenlegacyfoundation.com or warrenfiles.com. There you can click on our Contact Us link. there are 2 links there. One is for applying to the foundation. If you believe that you are the right person for us, then yeah, absolutely. Or you can also ask for help. Our applications are both in English and Spanish right now. Sorry, they're not in other languages, but we're working on it. And other than that, you can also go to the Warren Files YouTube channel. We've got over 100 videos on there where, no, you're not going to see things flying across the room, but you're going to hear the true story of Annabelle. You're going to hear the true story of the Amityville Horror. You're going to learn how to protect yourself psychically. You're going to learn how to properly conduct an investigation and things of that sort. To me, I'm not involved in the paranormal because I love it. I'm involved in it because there's a need for people who care. And that's what I want to do. I want to care. I am writing a book. I'm working on it. If anybody knows any publishers, let me know. It's my autobiography, Growing Up a Warren. And it also talks about, I've lived in 98 places around the world, from Africa and the Peace Corps to the Second Palestinian Uprising in Jerusalem, to meeting a military dictator, or even studying with the Dalai Lama. So that will all be in the book, as well as all of the weird cases and other experiences in my life, like having to fight a African drug dealer at the Eiffel Tower in full view of the police.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was interesting. It's been an unusual life.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that. And for a very limited number of people, I'm accepting applications for one-on-one classes for paranormal investigators right now. I'm only going to take between 5 and 10, but we're going to conduct this very similar to the way they do in Oxford and Cambridge, one-on-one. I work with the student. We discover what is their best curriculum, what are the topics they want to work on, but it's also very organic, like you and I talking.
Yeah.
1 minute we're going to be talking about one thing, next thing we're going to be talking another, and then we're going to be working on research. So hopefully we can get some great investigators out of that effort and get some new members into the foundation around the world.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, definitely check it out. Not only if you have problems and need help, check out the Warren Legacy Foundation, but also if you think you can be helpful to what they're doing and help spread their mission, reach out to them, get involved. It's been an absolute pleasure, Chris. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's not easy to be like on the other side of the world with a sketchy connection, but we've made it work. I've just loved this conversation, brother.
Oh, thank you. Me too. I've really enjoyed it. By the way, for your listeners, that's my living room.
Love the ceiling. That's amazing.
Yeah, we didn't show the ceiling, did we? That's the skylight.
That is awesome. That's beautiful, brother. Well,
yeah, that's a traditional home here. Yeah, I love it. I love. I leave my bedroom door open at night and listen to the rain fall into my living room floor.
Well, that's amazing, and I hope you'll come back. We've obviously just touched the surface here, but we've got a lot of ground to cover. If you're willing, love to have you back.
I'd be happy to. Thank you.
All right, Chris. Thank you so much, brother. Have a great day.
Get out!
Guys, thank you so much for joining us here on tonight's show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please feel free to follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Paranormal Portal Radio, as well as finding us on Twitter. We're on Twitter at Paranormal Portal, PORTL, And we'd love to have you stop by our YouTube page and subscribe and check out our shows there. We got hundreds of shows, Journeys into the Paranormal Portal. So I hope you'll check it out, guys. We're over there at youtube.com/paranormal portal. So hope to see you guys soon. We'll be back, of course, for more podcasts in the coming days. So we love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other. Help each other out. Find the magic in every day. And remember to laugh as much as you can.